What is going on, traders? It's Johnny here with Trader X. Thank you guys so much for tuning back into the channel today. I really do appreciate your time, and I hope you guys were all able to end green today. And I'm going to go ahead and get right into today's recap. So unfortunately, today was a red day, right? I was down triple digits. So I was down about $40 on JDST, another $52 on TQQQ, and about another $10 on SQQQ, right? And so these were all my filled orders. You guys can see the timestamps that I was trading here on the left. The quantity I was trading with is right over here. The ETF itself is here in the middle, and then the price points that I was buying in and out is here on the right for your reference, right? But before I get started with today's recap in terms of what I was day trading, I do want to bring your guys' attention to BBBY, right? So my brother and I were talking about this stock last week, and the reason for that was there was a lot of hype surrounding this stock. So as you guys can see, the past 10 days, this thing was gapping up huge, right? So it was originally trading at around $10 per share, and this thing within a few days gapped up all the way up to $30. And so a big reason why I wanted to bring your attention to this is the fact that so many people probably lost a lot of money just trading this thing. And the reason for that is as this thing was gapping up last week, right? It was really gapping up for no apparent reason other than the fact that there was just lots of hype surrounding it, right? Similar to GME and a lot of other meme stocks that pretty much get pumped up then dumped, right? This is pretty similar to how a pump and dump works, right? So as you guys can see on the bigger time frame, right? This thing does not ever really trade like this, right? This thing was, as you guys can see, these are these small little blue lines. It's kind of hard to see, but these are the volume bars. And what you guys will notice is as this thing was gapping up, right, and there was lots of hype and news surrounding this stock, it caused lots of people to want to buy into it, right? So as this thing gapped up all the way up to $30, right? Pretty much something you guys want to be aware of is the hype never lasts for that long, right? So as this thing gapped up, there was lots of hype surrounding it. What ultimately ended up happening? This thing ended up crashing all the way down, right? And the reason for that is there was no real good reason why this thing should have gapped up the way it did, right? There was just lots of people trading it. There was lots of momentum. And so given the fact that this thing gapped up to $30, the price was super overinflated. And guess what happens when the hype dies down, right? Once the hype died down and people stopped paying as much attention to it, this thing crashed, right? Crashed completely. And so for anyone who was, buying into this stock simply because other people were telling them to buy into it, well, they just put themselves in a huge hole, right? So from the highs of where it was at, it is now down about 70%, right? That is huge. Just think about that. Imagine you were to buy into something and it lost 70% of value within a few days. That would just absolutely devastate me, right? So that's why whenever you guys buy into a stock like this, you always want to make sure you have a plan set. You always want to make sure you know where you're going to cut losses, right? Otherwise, you're just going to be bag holding this thing. It's going to pull on back and correct itself to where the price point should be trading at, right? And then you're just left with all the loss, right? So yeah, people made lots of money, right, as this thing was shooting up, but those people who were smart probably locked in profit, right? Because otherwise this thing got rejected and they knew that once the hype dies down, ultimately the price corrects itself, right? So unfortunately there were, I guarantee there were people who ended up losing money big on BBBY because they were listening to others, right? So what you always want to do before you buy into stock is always have a game plan, right? Always make sure you don't focus on best case scenario, but you also focus on, worst case scenario. What can happen if in worst case scenario if this thing, ends up pulling on back and correcting itself. So in my opinion, it would have been smart, if you did ride this thing to not get greedy and lock in profits, because as we can see, this thing absolutely tanked, unfortunately. So, it was down about 5% today from where it closed at yesterday. So it's not, huge big picture, but the past few days before that, this thing was dropping absolutely ridiculously huge, right? We're talking like 30-40% moves, and that would absolutely devastate someone, especially if they're a new trader, this could have been very discouraging. So I do always want to make you guys aware of that. Make sure that the thing you're buying into isn't just being pumped up and overhyped, right? And it's just going to be very short-lived, unfortunately. And I do also want to talk about, the stock I mentioned yesterday, WAG. So WAG is a new stock, like I mentioned, and this thing, since it is a new stock, it's still trying to identify exactly, how it's going to trade, right? It's trying to find resistance levels, support levels. And I mentioned yesterday as this thing shot up a significant amount, right? that it would probably be in your best interest if you were in it to lock in profits, given the fact that it was finding a general resistance area around this level, right? So as you guys can see, based on the day today, PET is down 15% from where it closed at yesterday. So this is also could have been potentially another devastating blow to people if they bought in at these higher levels, right? That's why it's always really important when you're trading something like this, especially if it's new and it's still kind of trying to figure out how it trades between, which areas it's trading, that you always want to make sure you lock in profits and you're buying in at areas that make sense, right? So we've seen this thing bounce around 430 now. So as this thing gets closer to 430, would it be the dumbest idea to buy in there? Probably not. But does it mean it has to, bounce like it did last time? Absolutely not, right? So when you get into the stock, always make sure you have risk management in play and you know when you're going to cut losses and take profits, right? So as this thing approached its previous resistance level, right, closer to the $10 range, right? So right around $8.70, it got rejected, and it did end up shooting another time up to what, $8.30, and now it is pulling on back, right? So, for those who did get in yesterday at these higher levels, unfortunately, they also paid the price too, right? So that is everything I wanted to talk about in terms of that. Now, in terms of what I was trading today, I did want to take a look at the NASDAQ. And so a big reason why I felt like I struggled today was, it was obviously trading sideways and it was very choppy, right? So you guys can see this thing would change direction very, very quickly. And it wasn't really doing a good job of following with the EMA, right? So the EMA itself wasn't really a good indicator today because of the fact that this thing would break below it, then above, below, above, right? So I could try changing the settings on the EMA to make it, a bit more accurate. But in my opinion, it was more I should have, what I did a bad job of was I wasn't focusing on the bigger picture, what was happening, right? So what I could have noticed is pre-market, this thing bounced right around the bottom view up, right? Then it ultimately tried running and got rejected right around this area. And as you guys can tell, pre-market, it struggled to really, break above this area. It wouldn't really hold for too long. And what I could have done a better job of, or how I should have approached it today, is when market opened, I saw this thing shoot up and I got into SQQQ, right? So I did a good job of managing risks there because this thing, as it continued to climb, I sold out of SQQQ. And then as this thing pushed up, it got rejected, fell all the way down to bottom VWAP, pushed back up. And especially later on in the day, what I could have noticed is this thing was really just trading sideways. As it would approach bottom VWAP, it would bounce, touch top VWAP, bounce, fall all the way back down. And so it was finding a general resistance area right around, this area where it was pre-market, and then it was finding a general support area right around closer to bottom view up, right? Just like it did pre-market as well. And so it was trading sideways, and you definitely could have still made money today, right? And so as this thing approached closer to the bottom VWAP, right? What I could have done is gotten into TQQQ and then sold out at areas that made sense, right? Areas closer to this resistance line. And so that's pretty much how it was trading. You could have bought into TQQQ at these lower points, sold at the higher points, maybe got into SQQQ, right? The inverse ETF if you really wanted to, and you could have sold for a profit at these lower points. So definitely money to be made. There's no excuses there. I just want to make you guys aware of the fact of why I think I struggled. I wasn't really looking bigger picture. I was just thinking, oh, is this thing gonna start to sell off, push up? Oh, now it's time to sell off, or now it's finally gonna start to push up. When in reality, I was really, really missing the point, bigger picture, right? That it's trading sideways today. There's an area of resistance. There's an area of support. So try to make the most out of that, right? Unfortunately, I was just, kind of over trading and buying in too impulsively today, and that's really what led to me, ending red on the day. So on days where it trades sideways like this, there's still money to be made, right? I do want to make you guys aware of that. And in terms of, what else I ended up losing money on, it was JDST. And for any of you guys who are not aware of that, JDST is the ETF it's the inverse ETF of the gold future, right? So this is pretty much the gold future, similar to what like the NASDAQ future has TQQQ and SQQQ. Gold itself has JNUG and JDST, which are the two ETFs for it. And so the reason why I decided to get into JDST is I personally saw lots of value in it, given the fact that gold ended up shooting up very quickly within a short period of time, right? And I was looking at it on the 10-day, 30-minute chart to get a better idea of where it was headed. And what I noticed is that previously this green SMA line was acting as more of a support, right, for the gold future. And as this thing started to sell off, it corrected itself back up to the SMA and ended up getting rejected, right? So um, in stocks, what you guys always want to be aware of is if there is something that's acting as a support for a stock and then the stock breaks below it and then it starts to approach that same thing that was acting as a support, well, that thing, that green SMA line can now act as a resistance, right? So stuff that was previously a support can act as a resistance in the future, right? So that's ultimately why I saw lots of value in JDST. I felt like this thing could have gotten rejected around the SMA line, which it ultimately did, right? But the reason why I lost money on JDST is it didn't get rejected quite quick enough, right? I thought it was going to get rejected similar to crude oil and it was going to change direction quickly, but as you guys can see, this thing sold off, tried picking back up, and then started to finally sell off on the day. But by then, I was already done trading. I had already lost too much, unfortunately. And so, as you guys can see, JDST, the inverse ETF, right? This thing was selling off, and then as you guys can see, where gold ended up getting rejected up here, JDST ended up bouncing. And it had actually a pretty nice bounce if you were able to catch it, right? This thing shot up about over 5%. It ended up recovering after selling off so aggressively, right? So the idea I had behind trading gold today was there, right? Like I had a good idea in terms of what I wanted to do, but the execution was poor. So, um, and one thing I do want to make you guys aware of too is other futures and the ETFs don't necessarily have to react the same way that the NASDAQ does, for example. So what I mean is the NASDAQ itself, right? SQQQ and TQQQ react very well to it. And what I mean is if the NASDAQ, say it pushes up, what you'll notice is TQQQ does exactly that, right? It'll have the nice little push up and then vice versa. That means SQQQ will have the nice sell off, right? But when it comes to trading gold, the ETFs itself don't correlate as well as they do with the NASDAQ. So JNUG, for example, right, would shoot up. And then as you guys can see, it got rejected and traded sideways here for a little, right? But what you guys will notice is on the gold future, once this thing got rejected, it actually ended up recovering back to previous highs here almost. But as you guys can see on JNUG, that's not the case. It got rejected and it didn't really recover back or as close to where it was right? Similar to what the gold was, right? So what I mean is gold ended up recovering almost to previous highs, but JNUG itself didn't. And that's what I mean, right? So these ETFs themselves don't necessarily correlate as well as NASDAQ and SQQQ and TQQQ do. So that's ultimately, something I did want to make you guys aware of if you do decide to end up trading this. But yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about today. I hope it was informative for you guys and you guys learned something new. If you guys are new to the channel, we really do appreciate you guys dropping a like and subscribing. It really, really does mean a lot, and we do appreciate every single one of you. And if you guys have any questions at all, go ahead and drop a comment, and I am more than happy to answer it or break down any stock you guys need me to, or even just make a video on any questions you have, right? So someone commented yesterday if I could make a recap on what VWAPs are, and I'm more than happy to do that. So I'm probably going to try to post a video on that this weekend, actually, even though we normally don't post. I'm going to go ahead and try getting that out there for you guys. But I do appreciate your time, and I will be posting tomorrow. So I hope to see you guys then. Take care and, have a good rest of your day.